Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Crypto Crayfish. Today, we're going to talk about Trump and how he will affect cryptos this year and going forward. We'll talk about Russia, we'll talk about China, we'll talk about all the big players and the effect on Bitcoin and other assets such as Ethereum and altcoins. So, let's start off with this article by Forbes. How would a resurgent US China trade war affect Bitcoin prices? And to give you a summary here, um, I would say maybe 70% tough for Bitcoin, 30% good. They talk about if inflation fires up again, this could be bearish for Bitcoin in the short term, but bullish in the long term. I think overall, inflation is going to be tough for Bitcoin, and it's not something I would like to see reaccelerate this year. You see Bitcoin miners might be subject to increased tariffs, but at the same time, Trump is likely going to deregulate that industry as well, which will arguably help that industry. You see a battle of jurisdictions may take hold in the realm of Bitcoin and custody. That could actually be really good for the price of Bitcoin if different countries are trying to get their hands on as much as possible. And you see US China tensions potentially leading to conflict, which could lead to short term price effects. So these are all possibilities. Overall, I think China is going to remain a big player in crypto, a big player, especially in mining. And I think some friendly competition could actually be positive for the price of Bitcoin and for the price of crypto. Um, I do think if the trade war were to come about and get bad enough that it's really damaging the economies of either one, we could start to see some negative effects. But I think that would take some time. All right, let's move on to our next article here. Let's talk about Russia. So Russia has started using Bitcoin in foreign trade, the finance minister says. They are moving away from fiat currencies and trying to switch things around. And this is a big tone switch for Russia. They traditionally have been kind of skeptical on Bitcoin, not really allowing mining legally, all sorts of things. And finally, you can see Russia permitted the use of cryptocurrencies in foreign trade. As part of the experimental regime, it is possible to use Bitcoins, which we had mined here in Russia. And this is something that Putin is now supporting, which, without any, backing of Putin or what Russia is doing in Ukraine, you can still be interested in how their policies are going to affect the global market, especially in crypto. And it's going to be likely a big deal. This is a major, major power in the world also kind of getting their hands in. All right, let's move on to crypto mining demand surges in Russia with new regulations. This is what we just talked about. And you can see that demand for industrial equipment tripled in the last quarter of 2024 compared to the previous year after these new regulations that allowed them to legally mine crypto. So again, I think this is just you're seeing increased adoption in a lot of different areas. Even if it's not something where it's going to be used for daily transactions, it's valuable to have this many powers really intrigued and into it, and at least trying to partake economically, which is what we mainly talk about on this channel. And our last article we have to talk about is under Trump, cryptocurrency is set to go mainstream, but that won't make it any safer for investors. This is something, yes, we need to be careful. We'll have, continued talks and discussions about how to be safe in crypto on these channels. The main one, I just talked about how not to get scammed in altcoins. Go watch that video if you haven't seen it yet. It's a good one. But this article talks about how Donald Trump has hired many, many pro crypto representatives in his cabinet, and how money for both parties was extremely, extremely strong support from the crypto parties as far as their campaigning this year. And that's made a big impact. You really see politicians feeling like they have to honor the crypto firms and at least discuss it. in order to get those revenues for their running. And that's a big deal that's going to play a large role in kind of the large scale adoption and actual policies getting passed that are going to work for crypto. So, some things that we likely expect with Trump is likely some deregulation of the industry. You're likely going to see it's potential you see something like a strategic reserve, but at the same time, we already have a lot of Bitcoin on the balance sheets for the US. I don't know if he's necessarily going to add more, so I wouldn't bank on that. But I think our bull market is intact either way there. Um, in the short term, it's likely going to depend on inflation, but over the next few weeks, months, and up to a year, I think we're looking at a strong bull market as it really kind of becomes deregulated and becomes more common to be talked about. Additionally, you're going to start likely seeing, potentially Ethereum ETFs that can do staking, which if you don't understand what that means, staking just means that you're going to lock up your Ethereum for a certain amount of time in return for a reward, and that allows the network to work well. And right now, ETF investors in the stock market are giving that up when they invest in Ethereum, which is because of the SEC regulations. And again, if we deregulate that a bit, we could get some changes there. We're likely going to get combined Ethereum and Bitcoin ETFs together so that you can buy both, which I think is bullish for Ethereum for sure. So overall, I think it's in a good spot. I think Trump is overall bullish for crypto, and I think that's shown especially by the reaction we had after the election. You can see really this breakout. Really, this first green candle was that first week of November, and if you remember, excuse me, that was right after the election, almost the day after. We got this huge price rally of, we pretty immediately went up almost 57% in a matter of a few weeks to a month. So that's a pretty big price rally. That's a big deal. And that's something that we could potentially see a similar reaction, maybe not to the same extent as Trump takes office, which will be obviously on the 20th of January, which is a week from today, if you're in the US here. And some things to discuss. In the short term, we had this really interesting drop today where we actually dipped down below 89K. I can show you on this chart. And this is pretty interesting to see. Yeah, we went right down to 89K and then had a strong recovery. The stock market actually went green, and we are now, back at above 95. And I think that's just proof of, the market's uncertain what we're looking at here, and it's waiting for more data. It's uncertain what the Trump tariffs are going to look like. Again, if the Trump tariffs are really strong and negative and they make us an enemy on the worldwide scale, could be really hard for crypto. But if they're a little bit more casual than expected, they're expected to boost economic growth in the US, it could actually be bullish for crypto. So overall, I think Trump is bullish for crypto. I think kind of the wave is coming, and that fits into the seasonality kind of idea as well. Something I do want to show you, Bitcoin will often sweep the lows, which it just did today. Could we go lower? Yes, but I think we're likely going to wait till CPI before we decide that. So you can see all these lows, dink, dink. We almost hit it a few times here. We got one that went a little bit below it here, but even if you go all the way down to that one, we swept below that low today. That was at just under 91K. And Bitcoin loves to do this, kind of establish a trading range that's really strong with a support, sweep below that support to remove all the people who have put a stop loss just below that low where the support is. And then it often tends to get a strong reaction off of that level and reverse directions. So Really, the next thing we have to look forward to is Wednesday, which is CPI. And if that comes in hot, we're likely going to see further downside action. But if it comes in, you know, kind of in line or below expectations, I think we'll get some strong positive reaction from both stocks and cryptos. And then I think that would likely continue into the Trump inauguration next week. So overall, I think that gives you a good little estimate for Trump. The other thing that I think is really interesting to point out today is that we almost swept the low and put in a double bottom on the ETH BTC chart. We went down to like 326, and the low is just below 32 back in November. So if you bought these lows, I think you're getting really good prices against Bitcoin. If we zoom out here, right, this is our ETH BTC chart, and you can see that we've been in this huge macro downtrend, but traditionally the post-halving year, which we are now in, is when it really turns around. You can see last cycle, it went up to 0.88, 0.088, and we may not make it there this cycle, but we'll at least see a good amount of strength on that side of things expected. You can see last cycle a very similar price action that actually I can take a little bar chart if you all will just bear with me. And this shows, kind of a similar double bottom to the one we are potentially getting right now. Just shrink it. And hopefully you can kind of see how well that lines up. Let me just extend. There we go. That looks a little better. Yeah, so this is pretty wild to actually look at, this almost W formation. It's almost exactly the same. You can see that first low, high, low, low again, a lower high, and then another break to almost the same level, but not quite down there. And that is exactly what we're at now. And last time we had a really strong reversal off this level, which would be right in the time frame of that Trump inauguration. So I think be looking out for that. That's totally possible. I'll turn on my camera here just so you guys can see me. The other things we're going to be looking for is really the dollar to turn around. This is something that we were talking about a long time ago. We called that it was likely heading to 110, and we have reached there. And now really we're going to probably, if we can see some weakness on this, that'll be really bullish for cryptos. If we get a really hot CPI, we're likely going to remain bullish on the dollar and struggle on the cryptos in the short term. So be paying attention to that. It's the same with the US 10-year. We'd like to see this turn around. It could potentially move all the way up to 5%, but theoretically could turn around at any point here. So those are the things I'm kind of watching. I think as far as Trump on the whole, I think it's a good thing for cryptos. I would look to see what the inauguration reaction is, and I hope that you're doing okay with these shakeouts that have been really volatile in the first part of January. I did want to show you that this is something that happens pretty regularly. So let me hide this. We're going to go Bitcoin, and we're going to show only the post-halving years. So we've got 2013, 2017, 2021, and now 2025. And you can see we often get these kind of dumps in the first part of the year before then going positive for the rest of the year. So if I actually take an average here of post-election years, which is what we're in right now, you can see that red line. That's the average of all of the ones we've had so far. And let's see here. That compared to our current is pretty on par. As for Ethereum, we have had a weaker start to the year than normal. And I think that's actually a good thing for returns. in the long run. Obviously, it's a bummer right now, but I think what it means is you've got some catching up to do um, into January, March, February, or January, February, March, May, April, all those type of time frames. And so you can see here, we're down 10% off the yearly open. And usually, at least in past years, we haven't gone below the yearly open. So that's something to really take note of. I will say on the past charts of Ethereum, you can see if you actually zoom in on those areas, we did have really strong corrections in those areas, right? So take this wick right here. This is the week of January 11th, 2021, and you had a huge wick down. The open was at $1,200 and it went all the way down to $900 intra week, but that didn't get added to the ROI chart because it didn't have a weekly close down there. By comparison, we have had some negative weekly closes since the beginning of the year. Last week was a negative 10% candle on the week. So I'd really like to see Ethereum hold this $3,000 level that it just got a bounce off of today. It did go a little below that, but didn't have any candle closes below that. And I'd love to see some strength into the end of the week at a CPI, and then a run after the inauguration. I think we're looking well set up for that. A lot of cryptos are at support, a lot of stock markets are at support. But if we get that negative CPI, it's going to be really tough to have any bounces or strength. So, on more of a macro sense, look at these gains on the long term, guys. If we take the average of post-election years for Ethereum and we turn off everything else, we're looking at by day 163 of the year, so right around halfway of the year, a little before, you're looking at 24x ROI as far as the last two cycles averaged. So I think we will get diminishing returns from that, but we have some really good seasonality coming that likely should do really well for the markets if we can just keep solid on the macro setting. Hope you all are looking forward to the Trump election. Let me know how you're feeling in the comments below, and I will talk to you later.